Our opening words are from the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Joy is the reward, really, of seeking to give joy to others. When you show compassion, when you show caring, when you show love to others, do things for others in a wonderful way, you have a deep joy that you can get in no other way. You can't buy it with money. You can be the richest person on earth, but if you care only about yourself, you will not be happy and joyful. But when you are caring, compassionate, more concerned about the welfare of others than about your own, wonderfully, you suddenly feel a warm glow in your heart because you have, in fact, wiped the tears from the eyes of another. We will light a chalice here in our home, and you are welcome to light one in your home. Our church worship associate will also light the chalice at church. Please join me in speaking the words on your screen as we light the chalice, the symbol of our faith. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. And let us open our hearts to love one another. Our opening hymn is Sia Hamba. For those of you in our church building, please hum only. And on Zoom, you are welcome to sing along with muted mics.
Sia hamba ku kanyan kwenkos, 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 sia hamba sia hamba ku kanyan kwenkos, sia hamba ku kanyan kwenkos. We are marching in the light of love. 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 We are marching, we are marching, we are marching in the light of love. We are marching, we are marching, we are marching in the light of love. Sia hamba ku kanyan kwenkos, 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 sia hamba sia hamba ku kanyan kwenkos, sia hamba sia hamba ku kanyan kwenkos.
Each week we gather, we carry the sorrows and celebrations of our own lives. If you have a joy or sorrow you would like to share with the group, you can type it into the chat box and I will read it aloud for all those listening. For those in the sanctuary, I will read the joys and sorrows submitted prior to the service today. I will start by lighting a candle in honor of all the simple joys that are sustaining us. I will light another candle in honor of the sorrows and hardships we might be carrying. I will light one more candle in honor of the joys and sorrows we carry in our hearts, but not have been spoken aloud. We will share a moment of silence together. Some of us will experience that silence as a time for prayer, some as a time for meditation, and some simply as a time to honor what has been left said and unsaid. I invite you into a silence of your own understanding, holding our own lives and the world in our hearts. Thank you. We have two quotes today, again from the Book of Joy. In the words of the Dalai Lama, in fact, taking care of others, helping others, ultimately is the way to discover your own joy and to have a happy life. There are ways to give beyond our time and money. Jinpa explained that in Buddhist teachings, there are three kinds of generosity: material giving, giving freedom from fear, which can involve protection, counseling, or solace, and spiritual giving, which can involve giving your wisdom, moral and ethical teachings, and helping people to be more self-sufficient and happier.
I'm Beth Goodell. I'm a member of UUFN, and the next reading comes from a true story. Charlotte is a grandmother with a large old house in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. 6 grandchildren, 3 girls and 3 boys, are in her care. The house was grand once, the neighborhood was grand once, but disrepair has set in. Charlotte works hard to keep the house up, classes from Home Depot supporting her, but there are tasks beyond her abilities. We, for the moment not including Charlotte, we are churchmates at the UU congregation in downtown Philadelphia, a team created to help repair houses. We work under the name Rebuilding Together, whose volunteers across the country aim to help make homes warm, safe, and dry. The together in the rebuilding means that the volunteers work with the homeowners, never taking over, never talking over, but in partnership in the planning and the doing of the work, the homeowner family taking up hammers and paintbrushes alongside the volunteers. We, now including Charlotte and a couple dozen UU volunteers, work during 3 weekends to repair holes in floors and walls, fix cracked windows, replace stair railings, paint the girls' room. The girls chose the color and helped paint. Paint the boys' room. The boys chose the color and helped paint. Paint the whole inside of the house. Charlotte is delighted that a minister is painting her walls with her and says, it's a party every time they're here. We are feeling a lot of joy in working together with Charlotte. After all the repairing and fixing and replacing and painting, there's one thing left. There's a pocket door at the entrance of the boys' room. It's stuck open. Charlotte says it hasn't moved in years. If the door can come out of the pocket, the boys, including a couple of teenagers, can have some privacy. 3 UUs with Charlotte and lots more UUs standing by, jiggle the door, pry the door, oil the door, jiggle some more, and after many minutes of jiggling and prying and oiling, the door pops out of the pocket. Charlotte claps her hands together once loudly, beaming, and says with a wonderful gospel cadence, it's like moving the stone from the tomb of Jesus. A miracle. Not the supernatural kind, the kind of miracle when people come together to make everyone's home warm and safe. There's great joy in this kind of miracle, a grounded, loving joy. We means all of us. It's the together in the rebuilding that makes the miracle.
Thank you, Beth. Hilary Lamberty is a licensed community practice social worker. Her professional experience includes community organizing and political advocacy, community-based youth mentoring, and school-based family support services. Hillary has taught macro-level social work courses for Augsburg College and St. Catherine's University, and she joined the CAC team in September of 2020 as the Community Engagement Coordinator. Hillary lives in Apple Valley with her husband, Evan, their dog, Jack, and their 3 beautiful goldfish. Welcome, Hillary.
They really are beautiful. I know people expect you to say like 3 lovely children. No, that they're beautiful goldfish. Well, thank you all so much for allowing me to be here with you today. I was feeling emotional. This is like, I haven't been a part of a service on a Sunday morning in a while, and this is really lovely to be here with you and to be able to share about an organization that I assume many of you are familiar with. I mean, CAC has been around a long time, and I think, whoops, well, there we are. Yeah, many of you probably know about the Community Action Center. So I want to just go over a couple things about kind of how we're looking at how we do the work, right? It's not so much what we do, it's so much about like how we're engaging with people and how, really like in Beth's story, so much of that was that intentionality about how to be in that space, right? It wasn't about like the spackling techniques and the repair of the window techniques. No, it was about like how to engage with that family in a way that made it about more than just repairing the house. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today, is kind of how the Community Action Center is moving in that direction. So lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. So the Community Action Center, our motto really is that neighbors helping neighbors, right? Like, we are people who live in the community, who care about the community. It is, participants who go to the food shelf one day and then the next day turn around and they volunteer, right? And they help their other neighbors. And it really is this like incredibly beautiful cycle of neighbors helping neighbors. So the Community Action Center, we're a nonprofit organization focused on supporting the basic needs of low-income individuals and families. Our mission is to promote a healthy, caring, and just community for all people through resources, advocacy, and volunteer effort, right? So those 3 pieces really are the essential kind of piece of what guides all of our work. So, right, so healthy, caring, and just for all people. So when we think about health, right, it's not just the health of our body, it's the health of our hearts, the health of our minds. Caring, right? What does it really mean to be part of a caring community? We think a lot about that. We also think that a lot about like internally with our staff, what does it mean to feel cared for as a part of an organization? And just, how are we in all of the things that we do looking at our programming and our intentions and our vision through the lens of social justice, recognizing all of these bigger systems that are out there playing a part in everything that affects us and guides our work. And so really like those 3 pieces they drive everything that we do. So let me tell you a little bit about what the CAC does. So we have a number of different programs, but one of the major programs that we have is food access, right? So access to healthy, clean, beautiful, abundant, culturally appropriate, culturally inclusive foods. We have had the food shelf in Northfield for a long time. We now have a satellite food shelf there at the old Greenville School, the NCEC. We have a site there, which is super busy, right? Which really incredibly serves the north end of town. And we also have a new site in Faribault, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about later, right? So we do the kind of traditional food shelf model. We do mobile distributions. We do home deliveries, right? Where we've got volunteers who, drive. They pick up these pre-packed, pre-ordered bags at the food shelf and drive them out to people in the community who aren't able to get to us. We do emergency financial services. So that in this last couple of years has looked a lot like distributing and managing some of the federal rent assistance money that has been available through the federal government. Right. So in a typical year when we would, you know, be able to manage, you know, what, like $3,000 of rent assistance, we've gone through nearly $300,000, right, of assistance that has come from outside sources and then been reallocated into the community. That looks a lot like us partnering with landlords, all of these amazing, incredible people who house people. You know, so what does that look like? We do car repairs, youth sports scholarships. We do housing services. So the Community Action Center, we actually own some properties around Northfield where we're able to provide transitional housing and some emergency services. Maybe some of you have heard about the Hillcrest Village, which is this really incredible, innovative model of housing. It's going to be mixed housing units. They're on the north end of town by Dairy Queen. And it is this beautiful mashup of looking at social justice and access to dignified housing and environmental justice. And how do we use the technology and the resources that we have through the U of M, different architectural firms. I mean, so many people have collaborated to make this a zero carbon, like a zero carbon footprint place to live, right? So like all of the most cutting edge technology. So this model has actually been shared at architectural conferences around the world now, of really this balance of social justice and environmental justice coming together to meet the needs of a community. It's very cool. We have the clothes closet, right? So we have access to these amazing, beautiful clothes that people donate, and then we're able to sell them to the community. We also then are able to provide gift cards for families. So they can, yeah, if they need clothes to start school, if they need clothes for a job interview, like we're able to provide that as well. We do employment services, we do our seasonal programs, excuse me, right? So like Operation Backpack and Operation Joy, getting school supplies out into the hands of these kiddos. This last Wednesday was our Operation Joy, right? This holiday gift giving program, where over 900 young people, more than 900 kids from the Northfield School District were able to get support. Their parents were able to get a gift card so they could go to the store, they can go to Target, they can go somewhere and buy something that they know their kids will really love, and feel, yeah, just feel good about. Okay, so that is some of the what of what we do. I want to also then think about how we do our work. And right, so Community Action Center has been around for like 50 years in Northfield, more than 50 years. And a lot of the history has been kind of this traditional human service, social service model, very much kind of the traditional human service model. And so when our executive director, Scott Wapata, started, along with the support of our senior program director, Anika Richner, they really have started to think very critically about how we do the work, and being intentional about moving away from some of these kind of old school, like transactional models of like, you come in at an appointed time, you tell me your story, and then I reference it with this guide to say like whether or not you actually qualify for something. Very transactional, to a much more relational model, right? Because we know that like crisis doesn't get scheduled. You can't put it on like Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I know I'm gonna need support for this. It is so much about getting to know the people in our community. And when someone walks into the CAC, having them feel like, these are my people, right? I'm okay here. I can tell my story in the way that I need to tell my story and get help. And they're going to advocate for me, and they're going to go above and beyond, and be creative with me and be a partner with me in this. And so a lot of kind of what we've done in the last couple years has been in that shift. So what I really want us to talk about is the difference between charity and solidarity, right? So charity is very much this kind of, charity is something that you give to someone who is less fortunate than you, right? So it is the people who have giving to those that have not, right? So charity can be beautiful. Charity is good. Charity is important. Charity is essential, right? We have to be participating in charitable acts. It feels great to be a part of something, right? You know, to like donate something and give and be a part. That is so important. So my professional background, right, is in social work. And I just think this is such an ironic, like conversation that we're having, because what these early social workers faced is what we're dealing with again today. And it has been forever. This is that dynamic balance of how do we meet the immediate needs of people, right? The people who are in crisis, the people who've experienced trauma, like how do we, through acts of charity, like meet those immediate needs? But what these original, like first early social workers found was that like they could do all they could all day long. They could work and work and work, and they could, you know, like focus on healthcare and working rights and education and literacy and all these things. But their efforts could never be enough to stem the tide of people who needed support, right? And they really started to realize that like, if we're not addressing the systems and the conditions that are putting people in this situation, then nothing is ever going to change. And that was really kind of that flip of the switch for the profession of social work to really start then thinking about systems change, right? What are the things that are putting people in this situation and holding them there, right? These like by design systems. And so that's kind of, I think, ironic then to think about like, this is where we are still today, that this dynamic of like, we know that there is immediate need right now in this lingering, incredibly devastating global pandemic. There are people who need support and they need assistance and they need help more than they have ever had in the past. People who've never had to ask for help are asking for help. And for some of them, it might be the first time. And it's really, really challenging. It is very hard to ask for help. You know, it's people who have always had a job, who've been able to pay their bills, who are now asking for rent assistance, and they're terrified that they're not going to have a place to stay, right? These are landlords who are dependent on this rent because they're not able to pay their own mortgage if this money isn't coming in, right? So all of these different layers of this. Before the pandemic started, at the food shelf on a busy day, right? So on a busy day, they were serving about 25 households, right? So every day that they're open, about 25 households would come through and get food. Now an average day, not even a busy day, but an average day, we're serving 55 to 60 households every single day in Northfield, right? This isn't Minneapolis, this isn't St. Paul Lake, this is Northfield. So every day there are 55, 60, 65 households coming through who need food. And a lot of them are using, you know, like they're able to access this food so more money can go to gas to get to work. They're using this food so more money can go to pay rent, to pay medical bills, to pay childcare. I mean, it really is just like this situation that we've never seen before. So the flip side of that is we, you know, like as the need has increased, we have seen this incredible amount of generosity come forward from this community. I mean, I'm sure you know, if you've been in Northfield and you've been around, like, you know that this is a very generous community. People step up and they care and they are invested. And people who maybe didn't really think twice about it before are now, they know people who are having to access services that never have before, and it hits differently. So this is this idea of charity, this like giving. We know that we need to, we know that it's important, but there is also a dark side, right? There's a dark side to charity and the way that charity functions. So charity very much sets it up as us versus them. It is those that have and those that don't. It is very much top down. It is the power and the control of how we give and how we support is determined up here with those who have, right? Like it is very much a one directional kind of top down model of giving, right? It creates this deep divide. Charity also functions from a scarcity mindset, this idea that like, there's only so much, there's only so many resources, and we really have to guard this and make sure that people deserve it, that they are worthy, that they, right? All of these very slippery slope things that put me in a power of position to decide whether or not you and your family are deserving of this, right? So that's kind of that dark side of charity is it puts me and these frontline workers and staff and organizations in a position to decide who and who doesn't deserve, you know, and what that does essentially is it discounts all of the systems in play that affect people's lives, right? So it really puts that accountability kind of on the individual and their own choices without, you know, really recognizing some of the systems and the bigger kind of oppressive things that are happening in the world. Charity alone, right, it really focuses on the giver feeling generous and the receiver feeling grateful, right? And all of the expectation that kind of goes into that. Charity is great. Charity is lovely and amazing and beautiful. And it's important. It feels good right now in this time of complete chaos in the world. Like, it feels so good to be a part of something like that. We also then have to recognize that charity alone is never going to change the systems that are putting people in poverty and keeping people in poverty, right? Like, charity alone is not going to do that. So then what we have to think about is if we look at the approach to the work from a solidarity model, solidarity is very much shoulder to shoulder, right? That, like, I understand that my struggle is tied to your struggle and that your success is tied to my success. Right, in Beth's story, it was all about that shoulder to shoulder work and that intentionality that went into how these two people were placed in each other's lives and how they were guided to interact with each other in a way that was really authentic and based on relationship and not on one person telling the other what to do. Right, the support that was offered, it wasn't, you know, like based on this notion that Charlotte and her family were needy or helpless or, you know, that they just couldn't do it. That was not the foundation. It was that, like, there's a situation happening in that neighborhood and they need more support than what they can actually do on their own. And that is our responsibility, all of us together in that community. I think about, you know, like when the ripple effects that when we stand shoulder to shoulder with someone and we see them as these like full, beautiful, authentic, flawed, miraculous people, that we don't know what their experience is like. Like, I don't know, but I'm here with you and I care about you and I'm in this with you, right? And you think about, like, the amount, you know, like the ripple effects that come out of that kind of work are, they're massive, right? What is it going to feel like for those boys to have some privacy, right? Shut your door, you know, for Charlotte and her family to have a little more like brain space to think about stuff without constantly, right, chasing this idea of like, there's another problem, there's another thing, and what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Just the mental and emotional space that takes, that is so, so incredible. Right. So the way that we think about solidarity is that it is the recognition that we are all in this together, right? That, like, what's happening down the road does affect me. We are not separate. Solidarity goes beyond charity. It is not one directional. It's not top down. All relationships and power dynamics are multi-directional. It acknowledges that everyone has wisdom and everyone has resources to help solve problems, right? Like how Charlotte and her family solve problems is different than how I solve problems. And that is amazing because then together we can be a real powerhouse to get stuff done. Solidarity also then asks me to recognize my own position in this and really think about how I'm part of the problem. I'm part of the problem, right? There are things that I do, whether consciously or unconsciously, that are contributing in ways that aren't helpful. And then it also then asks me to be a part of that solution, right? If I can acknowledge that and be vulnerable to it and humble in that and say, like, I don't know, but I know that I'm in this, that is a really different way to approach this work. Solidarity means listening more than talking, right? It means knowing that, like, I don't know what the best answer is. You know, there's so many books and articles and stuff out there about like the amount of creativity and ingenuity that it takes to live in poverty. And it is a full-time job and people are creative and incredible. And if we're able to recognize that and see that as a strength and build on that and foster that, like, we really start from a different place. Okay, so this is kind of the context that we're in then at the CAC, right? Here we are in this global pandemic. Things are crazier than ever. Everyone is stressed. But what does that look like? So how do we, in these moments when we are pushed to the edge, think about how do we act from a place of solidarity? And for us, it really means self-determination. People get to make their own choices, right? And we will support them. It means choice. It means trust. It means respect. It means as an organization that we're going to be humble and we're going to be learners, right? We don't know what's best for people all the time. And we're not going to push our ideas on someone, but if someone has an idea and they're standing in it and they say, this is what's best for my family, we will do all that we can to help them in that situation. right? So for us, solidarity really means that like we're going to make that space to listen for people to tell their stories in the way that they want to, in the time that they want to. And in that, then our responsibility is also not to re-traumatize people. And I think part of that being trauma responsive is something that also kind of separates charity from solidarity, that people are not a box to check. They're not, you know, like, it's not transactional, it's about relationships. So solidarity work also means that we're actively working beyond our internal bias, right? Like we all see the world through our own lenses, right? From our own experiences, from our own point of view, from the things that we've learned, from the things we've been taught. But we need to recognize that like we are seeing the world through lenses that are different than how other people see the world. And we need to actively think about that and work on that and be kind and generous. Solidarity also means that like the opinions of this like, you know, longtime wealthy donor who is putting the pressure on, you know, someone to make a change or to make a decision or justify something, their opinion is not more important or more influential than someone who's a first-time shopper coming through the food shelf and saying like, hey, that was kind of an uncomfortable experience. I don't know that I'm going to come back, right? That person in that moment is so much more valuable for the long-term success of our organization if we want to do it right. So I know that's a lot of like words and a lot of talking, but the way that we're then doing this at the Community Action Center is that, so we have this incredible group of 12 people who are our Community Advocacy Council. And so these are people who've been a part of our programs, who've accessed the food shelf, you know, just been a part of the community for a long, long time. And they are these natural connectors, these natural advocates. They are the ones who hear what's going on. They know what's happening. And they care about CAC and they care about Northfield, right? And they care about their neighbors so deeply. And so they get together every Monday, right, for 2 hours, and they talk about what's happening in the community. What are they hearing? What are people experiencing? What are the things that they hear that we can't, right? That like we just don't have access to. And then we as an organization need to trust them. We need to follow their lead. And that is the commitment that we're making to letting this Community Advocacy Council really drive some of the decisions. It's this incredible balance of, you know, sometimes the CAC will bring stuff to the committee and say like, hey, we're considering this thing. What do you think? What do you see? What are we missing? What's in this? But then it's also, on the other hand, them bringing stuff to us and saying like, hey, here's what I keep hearing. Here's what I hear from new moms. Here's what I hear from people passing through town. Here's what I hear from people who maybe have had a bad experience with this certain element of the community. What do we do about it? And then it's on CAC to follow up, to do our part, right? Like to utilize and leverage our power and positionality to think about who do we have access to, what is happening, right? To do that next step. We also have kind of in this midst of this pandemic and this like incredible increase in people accessing the food shelf, moved to a choice model, right? So it used to be that when you would go to the food shelf, you'd get this kind of shopping list, and on all the like cooler doors, it would say like, if you're a family of 4, you can take 5 things of dairy. And if you're a family of 6, you can take whatever 7 things from the meat, you know, like the meat and protein case. And it was very prescriptive and you know, like for a good reason. Like we can justify all day long why that makes sense for ordering and planning and all of these things. But what it did then was it took choice away from people, so this choice model that we're in now says that like you can come to the food shelf as often as you need to. If you need food, come get food, right? It doesn't have to be once a month. It doesn't have to be every other week. If you want to come every day and get fresh produce and milk and eggs, fantastic. Please do that. It really is assuming that people are going to make the best choice for themselves in their own lives, for their kids, right? They know what their kids want to eat. They don't need us to tell them. They know what they like, right? Like, so it really is like our job is to make the healthy choice the easy choice, right? Like to have this fresh, beautiful, amazing produce, to have, you know, like clean food, beautiful food, culturally responsive, culturally inclusive food, and then let people take what they want and trust that they know what their own family needs right then, right? They don't need us to tell them. Is like a really like cool way to show that like, it's okay. We trust you. It's all right. Another example of kind of how we see this shift from charity to solidarity is in how we were invited to open a new site in Faribault, right? So at the beginning of the pandemic, there had been 2 food shelves in Faribault and 1 closed, right, in March of 2020. And there was this huge vacuum of need, right? Kids weren't in school, families weren't working, everybody was, and so there were 20 plus organizations in Faribault that said, we need help. People need food. Like, people are hurting. People need help right now, right? So it was the YMCA and Alina Health and the public school system and Faribault Youth Initiative and Healthy Community Initiative and Growing Up Healthy and all, right? All of these different organizations said, like, yep, this is clear. People need help. People need food. All right, so then the CAC was asked, right? Like, we have connections to food, to the food banks. We can order, we can put in. Yep, great. So, and that's how we went for about, like 6 months, 8 months, maybe, where we were providing the food. It was being housed kind of in different spots and then brought out to the community. Well, it got to the point where we realized that this pandemic is not leaving. This need for food is not ending. And someone is going to have to take the lead on this. And so this group of 20 organizations approached CAC and said, hey, would you be willing to kind of take the lead and continue to provide, access to healthy, free, beautiful food to people who live in Faribault, right? And so this was a big, big, big shift for us. And what it essentially came down to is like, yes, and we're going to need Faribault to tell us what they need. We cannot come in assuming we know how to do this well, but we need people. And so what we did is we had focus groups and tours and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who live in Faribault, who had been participating in our mobile food distributions, right? Like, we'd bring the van out full of food and we would talk to people and we would ask them, like, what do you think? What does Faribault need? What does your community need? What does your family need? If you were to invite someone in to like fill some of these gaps, what would that look like? And we did that, right? And so now we have this amazing, beautiful new food shelf. And we are able to offer services that people have specifically asked for, and so one of the things that like would have never occurred to us that the Somali community has really asked for is there's a large group of women, right? So like Somali women are like the most fierce, independent, beautiful powerhouses of moms you will ever meet. And they need practice driving, right? Like, they know that they need experience behind the wheel and they want help practicing that online driver's test, right? Because it's new, they've never done it. And so that's what they wanted. They specifically wanted women, right? Because it has to be women and women, to take them out and let them practice driving. And I just think that is the most beautiful example of like, that is not something we would have come up with, but it was an opportunity that we built a relationship with people in the community. And so they were able to authentically ask us and tell us what they needed. And it was very clear. And so now it's on us to say like, great, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make this happen? And I just think about like the conversations that are going to happen in those cars, the relationships that are going to come out of that, the like growth, right? Joy, right? Like that joy of like spending that time in your car, driving around with someone who it's going to be incredible. Okay. So those are just a couple examples of how the CAC were really kind of like, walking the walk and trying to do what it is that we know. Oh my gosh, it's been 20 minutes. I am really talking a lot. I'm sorry. Okay, really quickly, I wanted to talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan, because this is just like such an iconic, beautiful example of the difference between charity and solidarity, right? So the parable of the Good Samaritan is, there's this man who was hurt on the side of the road. Jericho Road is dangerous. It is hilly. And so the first couple of people who walk by, they kind of like put their heads down and they keep walking and they say, oh my gosh, like I can't. What is going to happen to my day if I stop and help this person? Like, okay, this could be really bad for me. This is going to like mess up my gig. And so they keep walking. And then the next person who comes by is the Samaritan who says like, okay, cool, I got this. Like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to take you somewhere and get you medical care and pay for it. And that's charity, right? Like that is that like, I am going to help you in your immediate needs. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., he actually talked about this parable a lot in his sermons and reflected on it a lot, because he called it a flawed parable. Because if we stop at charity, nothing changes, right? Like this road to Jericho is an example of all of our lives all of the time. There are always times and places in our lives that are hurting people, where people are, being destroyed. And if we don't, right, that's that moment of like, you're driving down the street and you see someone and you're like, oh my gosh, please don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. No, I'm just doing my thing. I'm going on my way. Yep. There are definitely times when that happens. And there are times where it's like, all right, I got some time. I got some, energy. I'm going to make the choice to do a charitable act. Fantastic. But what Martin Luther King Jr. said is that so this is a quote from him. It says, on the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and is not superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring, right? So he called this a flawed parable because it stops short, right? Like it stops too short. Yes, we need to do that. But we also then, like, in the next step, if we're only concerned with addressing that temporary relief and not changing the systems and not changing the circumstances that are putting people in that situation, then nothing's ever going to change, right? Like those earlier social workers learned this, that like we can work our butts off all day long forever and ever, and it will never stop unless something changes about what is putting these people in this situation. And I think that is what the CAC is wrestling with. And what we're doing then is we know that it's based on relationships. It is built on authentic, trusting, dignified, respectful relationships based on choice and trust. When you think about like that Maslow's pyramid, that hierarchy of need, like at the top is that belonging, right? Like that sense of belonging and the joy that comes with being seen and valued and heard and trusted. That is what we're going for. That is where this like act of this shoulder to shoulder solidarity work is going to get to. So that being said, right, like charity's not easy. It, like, especially right now, like it is hard to give extra. It is hard to give more, but it's important. And we know that. But what's even harder then is like getting beyond the superficial to like, what are the root causes that are happening, that are causing this situation? So we just, like when we think about kind of how we engage, and CAC is doing some really incredible work. And I think because they are this like beloved organization in the community, I'm sure some of you have volunteered with us before. Maybe you've donated, maybe you've been a participant, maybe you've been in the food shelf and you found yourself in a situation where like, yeah, I need some extra support this month. Fantastic. I would encourage all of you, come volunteer, come meet your neighbors. There are people who live in this community who have stories that may be really different than anything you've experienced. And the only way to get to know that and to see that kind of bigger sense of what's happening in our community is through relationships. And so if you're interested, come volunteer or come join us, come meet your neighbors and hang out. And it really is awesome work, and help us keep figuring this out, because we don't have all the answers, but we know that we have to keep marching. We have to keep marching in light, and we have to keep going. And, it's when neighbors care about neighbors that we can do that. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm sorry, I totally went over my time. But yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hillary, for your very timely and appropriate presentation. I would encourage all of you to please introduce yourself to the Community Action Center and consider partnering with them and what they do for our community. Hillary has agreed to stay on after our service, so if you have questions, hopefully you can meet up with her during our coffee hour and get some answers. Thanks, Hillary. Join us to hum, sing, or listen to the hymn, Love Will Guide Us.
Business trials,
we turn our attention now to the wider world as we take our offertory. Our recipient this month is Northfield's Community Action Center. The mission of the Community Action Center, as it was just explained to us, is to promote a healthy, caring, and just community for all people through resources, advocacy, and volunteer effort. During December, CAC runs its Operation Joy program, which seeks to provide a joyful holiday experience to all the children in Northfield. Operation Joy provides holiday gifts to over 900 children each year. Imagine how much joy that creates in the world. You can contribute right now online by going to our website, uunorthfield.org, clicking on the yellow donate button on the right-hand column, and then selecting share the plate. Or you can mail a check made payable to UUFN with offering basket written on the memo line. Separate checks marked UUFN pledge are also welcome. If you are at our church building, please put cash or a check, again made out to UUFN with offering basket on the memo line, in the basket. As always, thank you for giving as you are able. Now, please join us in singing or humming our final hymn, Spirit of Life. Our closing words are by the Gautama Buddha. Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle. Happiness never decreases by being shared. Please join me as we extinguish our chalice here and in your homes. You will see the words on your screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace. Have a great week. Thank you.
you.